Well, hello and welcome once again. We're going to continue reading from Convergence, Book 1 of the Dragon Within Saga. Again, available on Amazon. And where we left off is Drin had just seen, standing in front of the entrance to the festival, the three elves who were singing, and he found his attention on one of them. So we're going to pick up right then. Tallest of the three, she stood perhaps only 1 or 2 inches shorter than myself. Her hair was the color of an orange sunset, contrasting her emerald green eyes, both of which were set against a complexion of porcelain purity, the likes I had never witnessed before. Clothed in a smooth emerald green gown of material rivaling her perfect skin, she presented as if she was painted directly onto a canvas from the desires of my young mind. Her subtle movements accented her sharp and lean features, the way the subtlety of a predator on the hunt accented its grace, even though there was much explosive power possessed within. In an effort to escape her notice of my obvious intoxication, I would briefly glance to one of the other 2 elves, both beautiful in their own expression. With each turn, however, came a pain of longing to see perfection again. Consequently, I was unable to look away for more than just a moment. When I returned my eyes to seek hers, not because I wanted to be noticed, quite the contrary, but because I was driven to do so the way one is driven to continue examining a painted masterpiece, hoping to burn a visual replication into the mind for the sole purpose of revisiting it as often as possible. I met hers. Instantly I looked away, only to return a moment later and find her still lingering, a slight grin now set to her perfect lips. As if dismissing me and giving me permission to continue with my endeavors, their song ended, and her eyes left mine to acknowledge the applause they were receiving from the rather large crowd that had been gathering. "Let us go, son of mine," my father said as he had taken a place right next to me. "I am sure you will see more of them, as well as many other performers inside the festival grounds. Not to mention we are needed at the martial tournament shortly." It took me a moment to gather myself, and in doing so I glanced toward him and saw a large smile on his face, transmitting all of his understanding in regards to being a young man. As we turned to walk toward the entrance and reunite with the rest of our family, one of which was standing impatiently with her hands upon her hips, my father roughly grasped me around the shoulders with a single arm and said, in a rare moment of emotional expression, "I am truly going to miss you, Ecklerin." I had been to the festival on several other occasions prior to today, yet each time I walked through the ornate wood-carved arches Lord and Warden Henshaw had commissioned 15 years ago, I never once lost the wonderment upon witnessing the following scene. He believed that building a reputation for excellence and splendor was essential in attracting the types of merchants and trade agreements necessary for the growth of our province. And because the silver selection was interwoven so intricately with the functioning of the empire, its celebratory festival was the primary vehicle in the genesis and propagation of such a reputation. Increasing the wonderment, the wonderful sight of walking under the great archway of our festival grounds were surrounded by a 10-foot high long wall blocking any and all observation and enjoyment from the exterior. One could not even begin to comprehend the interior without walking directly under the gates. Clearing the archway allowed this world to open. The effect was nothing short of astounding. It must have been similar to peering through the keyhole of a locked room, knowing that an array of wondrous objects and mysteries existed behind, but from the narrow perspective, only a fraction of its reality was visible. And then, after endless moments of unsuccessfully attempting to see the vast wonders through a grossly inadequate perspective, once the door opened, all visual desires became fulfilled. Even my father showed a small, childlike grin on the landscape we now beheld. The festival was laid out as if a spider's web was cut in half and placed horizontally on the ground. The main archway led to the main pathway, which led directly to the Lord's Arena. This was the central thoroughfare of the festival grounds, and all the best artisans, and by best I mean the artisans who could afford to pay the highest lease fees, were traditionally placed somewhere along its length. As the spindles of the web progressed outward from the central road, the lease fees became less expensive, allowing for the smaller and less established artisans to also purchase a space to show and sell their wares. Connecting all 7 spindles were 3 half rings upon which more artisans were displayed. The lease fees for the connecting rings progressed in a similar fashion as the spindles. The closer the rings were to the Lord's Arena, the more highly trafficked they were, resulting in higher fees. The interconnection of these rings and spindles produced a very unique opportunity. Instead of leaving them be, They were widened and developed in circular stages, complete with several small rows of seating, usually comprised of hay bales donated by the local farmers. The resulting uniqueness produced a very different viewing experience, but equally so, a very different performance experience. Only the best performers, and by best I mean those who could adapt their talents to the demands of their structured environment, were successful. However important the artisans and performers were to the success of the renown of the festival, they all paled in comparison to the singular experience responsible for drawing crowd upon crowd upon crowd. All pathways, all food and drink, all performers, all artisans were purposefully placed in an effort to progress the visitor's expectations centrally toward the culmination of the Festival of the Moon, the martial tournament. The whole festival is planned not only to be enjoyed by its attendees, but to be enjoyed in a very unique manner by its merchants and performers, for they will ultimately be responsible for carrying its legacy beyond the borders of city, province, and empire. And no greater cause for the telling of tales exists than those created and propagated by prowess in one-on-one combat. We're going to end right there. Thanks again for joining me at the Dragon's Lair while I read from Convergence, Book 1 of the Dragon Within Saga, and I'll see you again for the next episode. Until then, remember to always release your dragon within.